The hall buzzed softly with the kind of chatter that came from people who were used to luxury. Laughter rose from the far tables, glasses clinked, and soft music drifted from the speakers hidden among the golden drapes. It was the type of night where everyone wanted to be seen, where guests wore clothes that shimmered under the warm lights and spoke in polished tones that matched their polished shoes. At one of the grandest tables sat a man who carried himself like he owned not just the room, but the world outside it. People listened when he spoke, even when his words were careless. Across the hall, weaving between tables with a practiced calm, a young waitress moved carefully, her steps steady and her eyes focused. She carried a tray with glasses that sparkled under the chandeliers. Her posture was straight, her movements smooth, but she never lingered near any table longer than necessary. She worked quietly, blending into the background like someone who didn't want attention. But even those who tried not to stand out sometimes caught eyes they didn't expect. The wealthy man noticed her when she approached his table. Maybe it was because she walked differently from the other servers, or maybe it was because he was already in the mood to entertain the people around him. He leaned back in his seat, watching her with a lazy sort of interest, the kind that often made people uncomfortable. She placed fresh glasses at his table, offering a polite nod. She didn't expect a conversation, and certainly not the one that followed. "Tell me something," the man said loudly, his voice rising over the soft music. "Do you play the piano?" The question came so suddenly that the glasses on her tray wobbled for a moment. She steadied them gently before looking up. Her expression didn't change much. She was used to odd comments, though not ones asked so loudly. "I used to," she said softly. Her answer made his friends laugh. A couple of them exchanged glances, waiting for him to continue, knowing he often turned small moments into scenes. "You used to?" he repeated, pretending to be impressed. "Well, there's a grand piano right over there." He pointed toward the polished black piano in the corner of the hall, a beautiful instrument that had barely been touched that night. "How about you play something for us?" The waitress lowered her gaze for a brief second. She had hoped to finish her shift quietly, but the attention now centered on her like a spotlight. She didn't flinch, though. She simply placed the remaining glasses on the table, calm as ever. "I'm working," she said gently. "Oh, come on," one of the guests chimed in. "It'll be fun. Just a little tune." She didn't respond immediately. A couple of guests nearby had turned in their seats to see what was happening. A few waiters paused mid-step. Even the soft music from the speakers couldn't drown out the sudden anticipation. The wealthy man leaned forward, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'll make you a deal," he said. "Play one piece. If you do well, I'll tip you more than your entire shift is worth. If you don't, well, no harm done. We just want a little entertainment." He said it as if he were offering her a generous chance, but the tone underneath made it clear he expected a harmless performance at best and a good laugh at worst. His friends watched eagerly, waiting to see how she handled the pressure. She stood still for a moment. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edges of her tray. Memories flickered across her mind rooms, where she once practiced for hours. Evenings when her mother sat beside her, listening with eyes full of pride. She hadn't touched a professional piano in years. Life had taken her in a different direction, pushing her into long shifts, small wages, and silent dreams. But something stirred inside her now, not pride, not rebellion, but a simple, quiet strength. She set the empty tray aside, her breath steady. "If the manager agrees," she said calmly, "I'll play." Her voice didn't shake. She didn't seem offended or intimidated. That alone surprised several people at the table. One of the staff members, who had been watching from a distance, quickly approached the manager. Within moments, the manager nodded from across the room, giving permission. He knew the wealthy man too well. Pleasing him often meant pleasing the entire group. The waitress took a small step away from the table and walked toward the piano. The hall grew noticeably quieter. Conversations dimmed, and the people closest to the piano shifted slightly in their seats. The air felt different, now lighter, yet charged with expectation. The wealthy man sat taller, certain he was about to witness something amusing. His friends whispered among themselves, some placing quiet bets on whether she would even know how to begin. But the waitress didn't look back at them. She reached the piano slowly, as if approaching something she hadn't seen in years, yet somehow still remembered. Her fingertips brushed the smooth edge of the instrument. She slid onto the bench, sitting with a posture that felt natural, almost instinctive. Her hands hovered above the keys. The moment stretched quietly. She wasn't thinking about the people watching. She wasn't thinking about the wealthy man or his dare. She wasn't even thinking about the money he promised. She was thinking about the first time she learned to play, the warmth of those days, the comfort she found in music when life felt heavy. She closed her eyes for a brief second, letting her breath even out. Then she began. The first notes were soft, almost fragile, like a whisper testing its strength. A few people leaned forward in surprise. It wasn't the hesitant playing of someone rusty or unsure. It was gentle, controlled, and full of emotion. She continued, and the melody grew richer, filling the room with warmth that had been missing moments before. The sound spread through the hall, weaving through conversations, demanding silence without force. One by one, people stopped speaking. Heads turned. Even the servers paused in the middle of walking, plates in hand. She played with a kind of effortless grace, as though the years without practice had never existed. The music shaped the air, telling a story without words. Her fingers moved with quiet confidence, each note carrying weight, each pause holding meaning. Across the room, the wealthy man's smirk faded. His eyebrows pulled together in disbelief. His friends stared too, their amusement slipping into confusion. None of them had expected this. The manager who had allowed her to play stood frozen near the back wall, his expression softening with every passing moment. A couple of guests exchanged looks filled not with curiosity, but with genuine awe. The melody deepened, rising then falling, carrying emotion that even the pianist herself had not expected to uncover. She wasn't playing for the hall, for the silence, or for the people who had mocked her. She wasn't even playing for the wealthy man. She was playing because the music had been waiting inside her for years, and tonight it finally had a voice again. Her heart beat steadily, matching the rhythm in her hands. She remembered the days when she chased dreams of big stages and bright lights. She remembered the people who believed in her. She remembered the night she packed away her sheet music because life demanded something practical instead. But now, for the first time in a long while, she felt like herself again. As the final notes drifted into the air, the hall stayed silent for a few seconds longer. The silence wasn't awkward, it was full, as if everyone needed time to breathe again after being wrapped in something beautiful. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started with one pair of hands, then another, then the sound spread like a wave. Guests clapped with genuine feeling, some smiling, some shaking their heads in disbelief. A few of the servers clapped too, unable to hide their admiration. The waitress stood from the bench slowly, her expression calm, almost shy. She didn't bow or bask in the attention. She simply stepped aside from the piano with the same quiet grace she had shown all night. The applause grew louder, echoing through the hall. At his table, the wealthy man clapped as well, though his expression was complicated. He looked at her differently, now not with amusement, but with a mix of confusion and something close to respect. Her performance had changed the energy in the room in a way he hadn't expected, in a way he'd never seen happen before. she walked back toward the staff area, ready to resume her work as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The guests watched her go, still whispering among themselves about the unbelievable moment they had just witnessed. And though the wealthy man said nothing for now, everyone at his table could tell he had been shaken in a way he didn't fully understand. The night continued, but something in the room had shifted permanently. The grand piano no longer felt like a decoration. The hall no longer felt like just another place for wealthy conversations. And the quiet waitress, who had blended into the background moments earlier, had become the most unforgettable part of the evening, that no one knew yet how much that single dare would change things. But the shift had already begun. The hall slowly returned to its usual sounds, but something inside it had changed. People still talked and laughed, but their voices carried a softer tone now. The kind of tone people use after witnessing something unexpected, something they weren't ready to forget. The waitress had gone back to her work like it was nothing, but the room couldn't shake off the feeling her music left behind. She collected empty glasses from a nearby table, her steps steady and careful. She didn't look toward the piano again. She didn't even glance at the guests who were still staring at her with admiration. Her mind was quiet now, calmer than it had been when she sat down at the piano. Playing again had touched something inside her, something she had buried a long time ago. But she wasn't ready to think about it deeply. Not while she was still on shift. A couple of guests approached her politely, asking small questions, praising her talent, complimenting her performance. She listened, smiled softly, and thanked them in her gentle voice. She didn't try to stretch the conversation. She didn't try to tell her story. She felt no need to impress anyone. She simply accepted the kindness in the same quiet way she accepted everything else. But not everyone was simply curious or kind. At the wealthy man's table, the guests were whispering again. But this time, their whispers held surprise instead of amusement. "I didn't expect that ad." "Oh," one of them said. "Neither did I. She plays better." Then the hired musician, another, whispered, and he dared her like it was a joke. Someone added with a short sigh. The wealthy man rubbed his chin, watching her from across the hall. He didn't speak for a long moment. He was used to being right, used to people reacting to him with nervous laughter or easy agreement. He wasn't used to being surprised, and he certainly wasn't used to being wrong in front of an entire room. He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes still fixed on her as she placed clean napkins on a nearby table. There was something different about the way she moved now. He couldn't tell if it was confidence or something else. But he knew one thing: he wanted to understand what he had just witnessed. Meanwhile, the hotel manager approached the waitress from the side. He spoke softly so the guests wouldn't hear. "That was wonderful," he said. "I didn't know you could play like that." She looked at him for a brief moment, then lowered her eyes politely. "Thank you. Have you played professionally before?" he asked. "A long time ago," she replied. The manager nodded slowly, as if trying to piece together more details, but he didn't push further. He could see she didn't want to discuss it. He understood. People had histories they didn't always share at work. "Take a short break," he said gently. "You deserve it." She hesitated. "There's still work. I'll handle it for a few minutes." He insisted. She finally nodded and stepped toward the staff corridor. Her footsteps carried her to a quiet corner near the back door, where the noise of the hall felt distant. She leaned against the wall lightly, letting her shoulders relax. She hadn't planned to play for anyone ever again. Not after everything that had happened in her life, the lost opportunities, the responsibilities that piled up, the choices she had been forced to make. She had accepted long ago that her dreams needed to sit quietly in the background while she worked to survive. But now, after playing for the first time in years, the music didn't feel like a dream anymore. It felt like something she had lost and unexpectedly found again. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in. The soft hum of guests talking seeped into the corridor, but it no longer felt overwhelming. For the first time in a long time, she felt a small spark of warmth inside her. Not excitement, not pride, but something gentler, like remembering a part of herself she had forgotten. Just as she allowed herself that quiet moment, she heard footsteps approaching. She opened her eyes slowly. Standing a few steps away was the wealthy man. She straightened slightly, surprised to see him away from his table. He didn't look as smug as before. He didn't even look amused. Instead, he looked thoughtful, almost unsure of himself. "May I speak with you for a moment?" he asked. She glanced around. They were still in a public area. Staff walked in and out of the service hallway nearby. She nodded politely. "I didn't expect you to play like that," he said, his voice lacking the arrogance he'd shown earlier. "I understand," she replied softly. "You were incredible," he continued, taking a slow breath. "I mean that." "Thank you," she said again, her tone calm. He shifted his weight slightly, searching for words. This wasn't the type of conversation he was used to. He often spoke with confidence, ready to impress or challenge. But now he felt oddly out of place. "I didn't mean to offend you earlier," he said finally. "You didn't offend me," she replied simply. "I've heard worse things before." That answer struck him more than she realized. She said it with such honesty, such quiet acceptance, that he felt something uncomfortable stir inside him. He wasn't a cruel person, but he had gotten too used to making jokes at others' expense. Too used to assuming he could say anything without consequences. "I'm glad you played," he said. "And I'm glad everyone got to hear you." She didn't smile, but she nodded respectfully. He could tell she wasn't trying to flatter him or soften the moment. She was simply being honest. He hesitated before speaking again. "Did you ever study music formally?" "Yes," she answered. "When I was younger." "Why did you stop?" She paused. Her hands rested calmly against her apron. Her voice remained steady. Life changed. He waited, expecting more details. But she didn't continue. She didn't owe him her story, and she didn't feel the need to give it. He nodded slowly. "Well, if you ever wanted to perform again, I know people who could help. You have real talent." She looked at him, her eyes gentle but firm. "Thank you. But I'm not thinking about that right now." "Of course," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to pressure you." "You're not," she replied. But tonight wasn't about going back. It was just a moment. Her words made sense in a way he didn't expect. Sometimes a moment didn't have to become a plan. Sometimes it was just a piece of the past returning quietly. He stepped aside so she could walk past him. "If you ever change your mind, I'm sure people would want to hear you again." She nodded politely before returning to the hall. When she stepped back into the glowing room, several guests turned to look at her again. Their expressions were softer than before, filled with warmth and curiosity instead of arrogance or amusement. But she didn't linger under their attention. She resumed work, moving from table to table with the same calm grace she always carried. But something inside her felt different. Playing again had awakened something she didn't expect. She didn't know if it was hope, longing, or simply a reminder of who she once was. She only knew that the sound of the piano still echoed quietly in her mind, at the wealthy man's table. The conversation shifted as he returned to his seat. "Well?" one of his friends asked with a teasing grin. "Did you apologize?" He shot the friend a short look. "Yes? And?" She wasn't upset. "That's surprising," another friend said. He shook his head slowly. "No, what's surprising is how calmly she carries herself. Like nothing gets to her." His friends exchanged looks, but didn't comment further. As the evening continued, More guests approached the manager, asking about the waitress who played so beautifully. A few even asked if she performed anywhere else. The manager kept his answers brief, protecting her privacy. Meanwhile, she continued serving with her usual grace, unaware of how much attention she had drawn. She simply wanted to finish her shift, go home, and rest. But deep inside, something had begun to shift. The part of her that once believed in music had opened its eyes again, stretching gently like a memory waking from sleep. She didn't know where that feeling would lead her. Not yet, but the night was far from over, and the consequences of one simple dare were only beginning to unfold. The rest of the evening moved forward, but it felt different now, as if the air itself carried a new kind of weight. Conversations no longer flowed with the same careless ease. People still talked, but their voices softened whenever the waitress walked by, like they were still holding on to the memory of her playing. Some even turned their heads to watch her quietly, not with judgment or pity, but with a sense of curiosity and admiration. She tried to ignore the attention, keeping her focus on her tasks. She cleared tables, delivered plates, and refilled glasses with her usual steady hands. But even while working, she could feel something inside her shifting, like a small flame that wouldn't go out no matter how much she tried to push it down. She had played again. She had touched a piano, not as a worker doing a favor, but as someone who once lived and breathed music. And it had felt both painful and beautiful. A soft breeze drifted into the hall as someone opened the balcony door. The night outside was calm, with streetlights glowing like quiet lanterns. Guests stepped out occasionally to enjoy the cool air before returning inside. The manager approached her during one of her rounds, speaking gently. "You're handling everything well," he said. "If you need another break, you can take it." "I'm fine," she replied with a small smile. But even she knew she wasn't completely fine. Something inside her was stirring too deeply, pulling at old memories she hadn't touched in years. Memories of hours spent practicing, of hands hovering over keys long after the sun went down, of the feeling of accomplishment after mastering a piece she once thought was impossible. The next moment came unexpectedly. A soft voice from behind said, "Excuse me. Could I talk to you for a moment?" She turned slightly and saw an older woman standing a few steps away. The woman wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, but her eyes carried a warm intelligence. She held a small program booklet from the event in her hands. "Yes?" The waitress answered politely. "I hope you don't mind," the woman said kindly. "But I wanted to tell you that your performance earlier was one of the most genuine I've heard in a very long time." The waitress felt her heartbeat pick up slightly. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot. You studied music, didn't you?" The woman asked. "Yes," she replied softly. The woman nodded, as if she had already known the answer. "I teach at a small music school in the city," she said, "and I can usually tell when someone has real experience. Not just skill emotion, heart. You played with both." The waitress didn't know how to respond. She simply held on to her tray and tried to steady her thoughts. The woman continued, "If you ever want to come by our school, even just to visit or practice, I'd be more than happy to welcome you. Talent like yours shouldn't stay hidden." The waitress lowered her eyes. "I appreciate the offer, truly, but I'm not sure I can." "You don't have to decide now," the woman said gently. "Just know the door is open." She thanked her again, and the woman walked back to her table. The moment should have felt kind. It should have felt comforting. But instead, it left the waitress with an ache in her chest. It made her think about everything she had lost, everything she had given up, because life demanded more practical paths. She walked toward the service area, needing a moment to gather herself. As she stepped behind the counter, she pressed her hands lightly against the smooth surface and breathed deeply. Then she heard a familiar voice. You're becoming the center of attention tonight." She looked up and saw the wealthy man again. This time, he wasn't smirking. He wasn't trying to show off. His expression was calm, almost sincere. "I don't want attention," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "But you earned it." She didn't answer. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. He took a slow breath. "I asked around a little," he said. "Someone told me you studied music seriously when you were younger." She paused, then nodded. "Yes? Why did you quit?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been earlier in the night. Her eyes drifted to the hall, where guests were still enjoying their meals. "Sometimes life asks you to choose between what you love and what you need," she said quietly. "And I chose what I needed." He nodded slowly, considering her words. "Still, that kind of talent doesn't just disappear." "It didn't disappear," she replied. "It just became silent." He studied her carefully. "Do you ever think about going back to it?" She hesitated. Her hands curled gently around her apron. "I think about it," she said. "But thinking and doing are very different." The wealthy man looked away for a moment, then back at her. "I know I didn't handle things well earlier," he said quietly. "I turned your talent into a joke before I even knew what I was talking about. And I'm sorry for that." His apology felt genuine, but she didn't need it. Not because she didn't care, but because she was used to letting words pass through her without sticking. "It's all right," she said simply. "It's done now." He nodded, accepting her calm response even if it made him feel uneasy. As she stepped past him to return to her duties, another voice called out, "Excuse me?" "Miss." A group of younger guests waved her over excitedly. She walked toward them politely. "Can you play something again later?" One of them asked eagerly. "That was incredible." She smiled gently. "I don't think that would be appropriate." "Oh, please," another insisted. "Just one more song before the night ends." She shook her head softly. "I appreciate it, but I really can't." Disappointment flickered across their faces, but they nodded respectfully. They understood. A little later, the music from the speakers faded, and the hired musician quietly returned to the piano. She watched him from across the room. He played well, but the hall didn't respond the same way. The guests listened casually, returning to their conversations without the same intensity. And that was when something unexpected happened. The musician, an older man with kind eyes, looked toward her. He nodded slightly in her direction, like he was acknowledging her unspoken presence. When he began to play again, it wasn't with pride or competition, it was with respect. As if he had witnessed something earlier that inspired him. She felt her cheeks warm, and she quickly looked away. She didn't want attention. She didn't want to outshine anyone. She simply wanted to do her job, but the night wasn't done shaping her future. Toward the end of the event, as guests started standing up and gathering their belongings, a soft tap landed on her shoulder. She turned and saw the music instructor again. "I don't mean to bother you," the woman said gently, "but I want to say one more thing before I leave." "Yes?" the waitress asked. "You may not realize this tonight," the woman said, "but life doesn't always close doors. Sometimes it pauses them. What you did earlier wasn't just good, it was rare. You played like someone who still carries music inside her. And people like that don't stay hidden forever, no matter how life tries to pull them away." The waitress felt her breath catch slightly. "I'm not sure I can go back," she whispered. "You don't need to decide now," the woman replied. "Just remember that you have something precious, something not everyone gets, and it's still yours, whether you choose to use it or not." The woman squeezed her hand lightly, then walked away. The waitress stood still for a moment, absorbing every word. Something inside her, something she had buried for years, shifted again. This time stronger, like a quiet heartbeat awakening Dot later that night. When the event ended and the guests slowly drifted out into the cool night air, she found herself lingering near the piano. She didn't touch it. She didn't sit down. She simply stood there, staring at the keys that had brought her childhood back to life. The wealthy man passed by the doorway and noticed her. He stopped for a moment, but didn't interrupt. She took one last look at the piano before turning off the hall lights. She didn't know where the path ahead would lead. But one thing was clear: this night had opened a door inside her that she had never expected to open again. And whether she liked it or not, something new had already begun. The day after the dinner, the small town seemed to hold its breath a little. People who had been at the restaurant the night before were already whispering about the moment. The quiet waitress sat at the piano and stunned everyone. Some spoke with pride, others with surprise, and a few with disbelief. But no one could deny one thing. Something unusual had happened. Something that wasn't going to fade away quickly. At the restaurant, the morning routine carried on as always. The clink of cups, the warm smell of fresh bread, and the familiar hum of voices filled the space. The young waitress moved quietly from table to table, doing her work just like she had done for years. But inside, she felt different. She felt like something had shifted inside her, something she couldn't fully explain. She tried to look calm, even though her thoughts kept going back to the previous night. She could still see the faces staring at her, the glimmer of shock, the quiet awe. She could still hear the sound of her own fingers moving over the keys, almost like they were doing the work on their own. And she definitely could still hear his voice, the wealthy man who had dared her, the man who thought she was just someone he could tease. She didn't know what she expected from him now. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. In the middle of wiping down a table, she heard her coworker whisper, "Hey, he's back." For a moment, her heart stopped. She didn't even have to look. She already felt his presence, felt the shift in the air. But she forced herself to stay still and only lifted her head a little, pretending she was simply checking to see if someone needed help. There he was, the same man from the night before, dressed neatly again, but not as polished as he had been yesterday. He looked more human today, less like someone wrapped in his own confidence. And the moment his eyes met hers, he gave a small nod. Not a smirk, not a challenge, just a nod. She wasn't sure what it meant. He walked up to the counter where her coworker greeted him. Instead of ordering quickly like the others, he hesitated. Then he asked, "Can she take my order?" Her coworker glanced at her with raised eyebrows, as if silently asking whether she was okay with it. She took a breath, then walked toward him. "Good morning," she said softly. He looked at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing someone new, someone he hadn't understood the night before. "Good morning," he replied. "I wanted to say something to you." She waited. "I owe you an apology," he said, lowering his voice. "I shouldn't have spoken to you the way I did yesterday. I was rude, and I misjudged you terribly." The words hung in the air. Honest words. Heavy words. She didn't rush to respond. Instead, she studied him quietly. She could see that he meant what he was saying, but she also sensed that his apology wasn't the only reason he had come. "Thank you," she said simply. "I appreciate that." He nodded again, almost relieved. "I also wanted to ask about your playing," he continued. "That wasn't normal. That was talent. Real talent." She shifted slightly, feeling a mix of shyness and uncertainty. "My mother taught me," she said, "before she passed." The man's expression softened. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She nodded, accepting his sympathy. "She loved music," she added gently, "and she wanted me to love it too." He listened carefully, like he didn't want to miss a single word. "Have you ever played anywhere else?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, only for myself." Last night. He let out a slow breath, as if trying to understand why someone with such a gift had kept it hidden. After a moment of silence, he said something unexpected. "There's a charity event next month," he said. "A formal one. Many talented performers are invited to play there. And I want you to be one of them." She stared at him in disbelief. He continued, "I know you don't know me well, and I know I wasn't kind yesterday. But I meant what I said. You have something rare. Something people need to hear. I'd be honored if you would consider performing." Her breath caught. A formal event? A hall filled with important people? People who had probably trained for years. People who might laugh at her in the same way he had the night before, or even worse. "I don't know," she whispered. He didn't push her. "You don't have to decide now," he said softly. "But think about it. You deserve a stage bigger than this one." Those words lingered in her mind even after he took a seat and quietly ate his breakfast. Every now and then, she found herself glancing his way, wondering why someone like him would care about someone like her. But maybe it wasn't about their differences. Maybe it was about the music. When he finished his meal, he came to the counter and placed the money down. Before leaving, he turned to her again. "If you're willing," he said, "I'd like to hear you play again. Not as a dare, not as a joke, but because your music stayed in my mind all night." She blinked, surprised. "I'm not sure I can play right now," she said softly. "That's okay," he replied. "But one day, I hope you'll choose to." He left the restaurant without another word, leaving behind a sense of quiet sincerity she hadn't expected from him. Later that afternoon, when the rush slowed down, she found herself standing near the old piano again. Her fingers touched the keys lightly, remembering the feeling of the night before her coworker walked up and said, "You know, people are still talking about your playing." She gave a shy smile. "I noticed. Are you going to do it?" her coworker asked. "The event he mentioned?" She sighed. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I'm not good enough?" "You are," the coworker said firmly. "Last night proved that. You just have to believe it too." Belief. That was always the hardest part. That evening, as she walked home, the sky was painted in soft shades of gold and blue. She carried her small bag and took careful steps, her mind full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine before. As she reached her street, she stopped for a moment. She closed her eyes and imagined herself sitting at a grand piano, not in a small restaurant, but on a real stage. She imagined lights above her, an audience in front of her, and her fingers moving with purpose. The thought scared her, but it also warmed something deep inside her, a quiet spark that had been waiting for years. She didn't know what the future would bring. She didn't know whether she would find the courage to accept his offer. But for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where her music could be heard. And that alone was something extraordinary. She kept walking, the sound of last night's melody echoing in her heart. It was no longer just a memory. It was a reminder that she had something inside her that could change her life, if she chose to let it. The night settled around her, calm and gentle, and somewhere deep within her, a new beginning quietly formed. The morning light slowly filled her small room, touching the walls gently, as if trying not to disturb her sleep. But she was already awake. She had barely slept at all. Her mind kept spinning with thoughts of the charity event the wealthy man had mentioned. Every time she tried to close her eyes, the scene returned: bright lights, a large hall, hundreds of faces watching her. It made her heart race, not in fear alone, but in a strange mix of excitement and worry. She sat up quietly, rubbing her hands together. They were a little cold, as they always were when she was nervous. She looked toward the small keyboard she kept near the window. It wasn't anything fancy, just an old instrument she had bought secondhand years ago. but it was enough for her to practice whenever she needed to calm her thoughts. She walked to it slowly, touching the keys with soft fingertips. She pressed one note, then another, letting the sound settle inside her. For a moment, she forgot about everything who she was, what she feared, and what she hoped for. It was just her and the music, but her moment of peace didn't last long. The doubts came back like a slow wave. What if I fail? What if they laugh at me? She whispered to herself. She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts away, but they clung to her like shadows. After getting ready for work, she stepped outside. The cool morning air brushed against her face, grounding her a little. The streets were quiet, but alive with the usual sounds, cars passing in the distance, shop doors opening, people starting their day. She walked calmly, though her heart felt heavy. When she reached the restaurant, her coworker was already inside, tying an apron around her waist. "There you are," her coworker said with a warm smile. "Rough night?" She sighed softly. "Couldn't sleep much. The event?" She nodded. Her coworker walked closer and gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "It's normal to be scared, but scared doesn't mean unprepared. You have real talent. You just don't believe it yet." She looked down. "I'm trying to." As they set up for the morning rush, she moved quietly, but her thoughts stayed tangled. Every clatter, every order, every sound felt distant. Her mind was somewhere else, imagining herself sitting before an audience that would judge her every move. Around noon, the restaurant bell rang, and she looked up without meaning to. Her heart skipped. He had come back. The wealthy man stepped through the door, dressed neatly again, but carrying no air of pride or arrogance. Instead, he looked like someone who had thought carefully before walking in. He didn't search the room. He looked straight at her. He approached slowly. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded, unsure of what he wanted to say. He waited until she stepped aside into a quieter corner. "I wasn't sure if you would be here today," he began softly. "I work every day," she replied. He smiled gently. "I want to say something, and I want you to hear it clearly. You don't owe me anything. Not a performance. Not a yes. Not a reason. I asked you because I truly believe in you. That's all." His voice was calm, without pressure. "I'm not trying to make your life harder or overwhelm you," he continued. "I just want you to have the chance you deserve." She swallowed. "I'm scared," she admitted. His expression softened further. "I know. Everyone is scared the first time they step into something bigger than themselves. I was scared too once." She blinked, surprised. "You?" "Of course," he said with a small laugh. "I didn't grow up wealthy. I built my life from nothing, and every step I took was terrifying. But the only thing worse than trying was not trying. I don't want you to miss something that could change your life." She didn't know what to say. His honesty touched her more than she expected. "You don't have to answer today," he added. "Just think with your heart, not your fear." He stepped back, giving her space, then returned to a table and quietly ordered lunch. She carried his plate to him later, and for a moment their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. There was no pressure, only understanding. Throughout the day, she tried to work as usual, but her mind kept replaying his words. He wasn't trying to show off. He wasn't trying to control her. He just believed in her, something she rarely felt from anyone. By the time the restaurant closed, she found herself sitting alone at the old piano again. The lights were dim, and the soft smell of the day's meals lingered in the air. She rested her hands on the keys and took a slow breath. Then she played, not a performance, not a show. Something simple, gentle, almost like a whisper. Each note carried her memories, her mother's hands guiding hers, the laughter they shared, the comfort music always brought her. As she played, Her fear slowly melted, replaced by something fragile, but growing. Hope. She didn't hear the door open behind her. She didn't hear footsteps approaching. She only heard the final few notes of her quiet melody. When she finished, she looked up and froze. He was standing a few steps away, watching her with a soft, almost stunned expression. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I didn't mean to disturb you." The door was still open, and I heard your playing. She felt a sudden warmth in her cheeks. She stood quickly, embarrassed. "I was just practicing." "It was beautiful," he said simply. "Even more beautiful than last night." She looked down, shy and unsure. He stepped forward slowly, giving her enough room to move away if she wanted. "Can I share something with you?" he asked. She nodded. "I think you're ready," he said softly. "Not because you're perfect, not because you're fearless, but because you play with heart. And that's what people truly feel." She swallowed, her chest tightening. "You think I can really do it?" she whispered. He smiled gently. "I don't think. I know." The room felt still, like the world had paused just long enough for her to believe his words. She took a slow breath. "If I say yes, what happens next?" "I'll help you prepare," he said. "I'll make sure you have everything you need. And on the day of the event, I'll be there. You won't face that stage alone." Those words settled deep inside her, warming something she had kept hidden for years. She didn't answer right away. She walked back to the piano, placing her hand gently on the keys. Then, with a quiet voice, she said, "I think I want to try." His smile widened, gentle and proud. "You won't regret it," he whispered. She wasn't sure yet if that was true. But for the first time, she felt brave enough to hope. And that was enough for now. As they walked out of the restaurant together, the night sky above them was calm and clear, as if the world itself was cheering for the new step she had finally taken. The days leading up to the charity event passed faster than she expected. Each morning she woke with a nervous flutter in her chest, and each night she fell asleep with tired fingers after practicing for hours. The wealthy man kept his word. He guided her gently, but never pushed. He checked on her progress, helped her understand what the event would be like, and made sure she didn't feel alone. Still, fear followed her everywhere. She had never imagined performing for a real audience, especially one filled with people from wealthy families, business owners, and well-known faces in the city. She feared being judged. She feared making a mistake. She feared standing out in a world she had never belonged to. But each time, the fear grew too heavy. She remembered her mother's hands on the keyboard, guiding her softly. And she remembered the man's voice telling her she was ready. On the morning of the event, she woke before sunrise. Her small room felt different today, quieter, almost waiting for her to take the next step. She brushed her hair slowly, washed her face, and sat for a moment in front of the old keyboard. She touched the keys gently, letting her fingers rest there. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. She played just a few soft notes, nothing more. She didn't want to practice too much. She didn't want to exhaust her mind. She wanted her heart to stay calm. When she stepped outside, the morning air was crisp and cool. She walked to the bus stop with slow steps, her hands tucked inside her sleeves. She wasn't dressed in her usual work clothes. Instead, she wore a simple but elegant dress the man had arranged for her to have, nothing flashy, just something that made her feel presentable. When she arrived at the venue, her breath caught. The building was enormous. Tall, shining windows. A grand entrance. People in elegant clothing walked in and out, talking in low voices, holding invitations. It felt like another world, one she had never stepped into before. She froze at the entrance. Her hands trembled. What if she didn't belong here? What if they looked at her and saw nothing but a waitress pretending to be something she wasn't. She took a step back without meaning to, but before she could turn away, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You made it." She turned. The wealthy man stood there, dressed in a formal suit, but with the same gentle expression she had grown used to. He wasn't there as someone superior or someone important. He stood in front of her like someone who genuinely cared. "You're early," he said with a warm smile. "I almost didn't come," she admitted. "I know," he replied softly. "But you're here, and that's what matters." She swallowed, trying to calm her breathing. He offered his hand, not to lead her, but to steady her. "Come, let me show you the stage." She hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand in his. It felt warm, steady, reassuring. Together, they walked into the building. The large hall inside took her breath away. Rows and rows of seats, tall ceilings, soft, warm lights, and at the very front a grand piano. She stopped walking. The piano looked beautiful and intimidating all at once. So different from the old one at the restaurant. So different from the keyboard in her room. This one belonged to a world she had never stepped into. Her breath trembled. He noticed. "I said I'd be here," he reminded her quietly. "And I meant it." She nodded, not trusting her voice. He guided her to the stage, helping her take slow steps. When she reached the piano, her fingers hovered above the polished wood, almost afraid to touch it. "Try it," he encouraged. She sat down slowly, feeling the weight of the room around her. She pressed one key. The sound was rich and deep, filling the hall, even though she played only a single note. She closed her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's yours today," he said. "Make it your own." The time before the event passed quietly. Organizers walked around the hall, setting things up. Musicians tuned their instruments. Volunteers arranged flowers. Through it all, she sat near the stage, trying to calm her racing heart. People who passed by smiled politely. Some looked curious. A few whispered softly when they realized she wasn't a familiar face among the performers, but she didn't let herself listen. Finally, the hall filled. People took their seats. The soft murmur of voices rose and fell like a gentle wave. She felt faint for a moment. So many people. The event began. Several performances came before hers. A violinist, a small choir, a young man playing a classical piece. Each one received warm applause. Each one sounded polished and confident. Her hands grew colder with each passing minute. Then she heard her name. Her heart stopped. She looked at him. He gave a small nod. "You're ready," he whispered. She stood slowly, her legs slightly unsteady. She walked toward the stage, each step echoing in her ears. When she finally reached the piano, she sat down quietly, trying to breathe. The hall fell silent. Hundreds of eyes watched her. She placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, just one fragile moment, she felt like she couldn't do it, like the fear would swallow her. Then she closed her eyes, and she remembered her mother's gentle voice. Music comes from the heart, not from perfection. She exhaled slowly. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost shy. The hall remained silent, listening. Little by little, the melody grew gentle, emotional, full of warmth. It wasn't a perfect performance. It wasn't complex or loud. It was simple, honest, full of feeling. Her fingers moved almost on their own, carried by memories, by love, by quiet strength. She forgot about the audience. She forgot about the hall. She forgot about everything except the music. When the final note faded, she stayed still for a moment, her hands resting gently on the keys. Silence, then dash applause. Soft, at first, then louder. and rising until the entire hall was filled with it. She lifted her head slowly, her eyes widening. People were standing, clapping, smiling. She felt her breath catch. Her heart swelled. A warmth she hadn't felt in years washed over her. She had done it. When she stepped off the stage, the wealthy man was waiting for her. His eyes shone with pride. That, he said softly, was beautiful. She didn't even try to stop the tears that filled her eyes. She let them fall. I did it, she whispered. You did, he said. And you were unforgettable. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of kind words, gentle praise, and warm smiles from strangers. People asked her about her journey, her music, her story. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. As the hall finally emptied, she stood quietly near the piano one last time. The man walked beside her. How do you feel? He asked. She looked at the empty stage, the soft lights, the place where she had found a new part of herself. I feel free, she said softly. He smiled. You've opened a door today, he told her. And there's a whole world waiting for you on the other side. She nodded slowly. And I want to walk through it. He held her gaze, warm and steady. You won't walk alone. She didn't answer with words. She simply smiled soft, grateful, and full of hope. As they walked out together into the cool night air, the world around them felt wider than ever. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life had changed, and it had changed because she dared to play.